Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. We're just gonna give everybody a few more minutes in case people are joining a bit late and you have to fill out that registration thing right before joining. So just a few more minutes. Thank you. Andy and Taylor, it looks like we don't have anybody else in the waiting room unless I'm seeing something different.
Okay,
Yeah, we can start.
so should we rock and roll?
Oh, there's a few more. Oh, thanks, Taylor.
Oh, two folks in there, yeah.
Okay, so I'm seeing in the chat that people are having trouble registering again. So I'll just give it a few more minutes, maybe like 4:08, and then we'll start.
That's good.
Andy, what do you think? Should we start?
I mean, anybody else in the waiting room, or I mean, the waiting
No.
room's empty, right?
Yep, no one else in the waiting room as of now, but I'll admit them as they come in.
Okay. I think we should kick it off here, guys. So am I good to go, or am I waiting for Taylor to open everything up?
I think you're good to go.
Everybody's here. Okay. Good stuff. Okay, so just a quick bit of housekeeping. We just want to let you guys know that the chat box is kind of functional. I don't totally understand this, but if you go in the chat box, we're asking for you to submit questions along the way as we're discussing things. If you would target your chat to go to Taylor McFarland, So you'll have an option when you submit something in chat, please pick Taylor's name so that she picks up your question and that we can eventually see it. So don't address it to myself or Angelique, please send it to Taylor. Okay. So yeah, this is the first climate work group meeting. My name is Andy Bennett, and I am a co-chair of this group along with Angelique. I'm a member of the board of directors of the New Jersey Forestry Association. Our association exists to promote sound forest management on both private and public lands in New Jersey. I also work as a private consulting forester in northern New Jersey. Along with my team, we serve nearly 700 landowners and help care for more than 25,000 acres of forested land. Angelique, go for it.
Thank you, Andy. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us and for dedicating this time to this work. I'm Angelia Ramos, and I'm one of the co-chairs of this task force, and I'm working with Andy to moderate and to lead the conversation in this work group, the climate change work group. I'm the New Jersey State Director of the Sierra Club, and many of you know what Sierra Club stands for, but for those of you that don't know, Sierra Club was actually founded 125 years for the sole purpose of protecting forests and land. So as you can imagine, this is very important for us, not just on a New Jersey level, but on a national level. So this work is very near and dear to our core mission and to our hearts. It's very important for us. So we're very excited that we're leading the conversation for some very much needed legislation and regulation of our public lands. Andy.
All right. So an overview of our climate work group here. So just a quick refresher, I want to go backwards. So Senator Smith formed a forest stewardship task force with the intent that the task force would study and identify ways in which the state can best manage its forests in order to fight climate change, prevent forest fires, improve ecosystems, and protect soil and water quality, among other things. The task force will take feedback and compile a report of consensus and non-consensus issues with respect to forest stewardship. So my fellow co-chairs and myself, we decided that to best achieve that objective, we would create two work groups, one focused on kind of all things climate and the other focused on ecological health. Angelie and I are obviously leading this group on climate. We understand that there's going to be a lot of overlap between the two groups of climate and ecological health, but our group is going to try to focus mostly on anything and everything related to climate. So back at our kickoff meeting, I had shared just a quick list of a few questions that we might cover. They might come up in our conversation. So I'll just quickly rattle some of those off. What policy or management changes are needed on our public forests in response to climate change? How should our public forests be cared for through management, restoration work, and protection in view of climate change? What steps should be taken to increase the overall health and resiliency of our public forests in relation to climate change? In view of climate change, should certain actions be taken to address carbon sequestration and carbon storage? Are additional steps needed to protect against potential catastrophic wildfires similar to those we see in other states? How might these initiatives be funded? What role should harvesting trees play to help achieve climate objectives on our public forests? So that's just a sampling of questions that we might get to, or I believe we will get to as we discuss things related to climate. So I'm going to move on to our favorite part of the meeting, rules of engagement. So we went over this in our first meeting. Actually, Angelie covered this, I believe. We have made a few tweaks and we've made some additions. So I just want to kind of recalibrate ourselves and kind of set the record straight here. So we have a section called guidance to participants. I think everybody has a copy of this, right? I think the folks were given a copy. So, but just to reiterate, this is all from the last meeting. As a reminder, guidance to participants: behave in a professional and respectful manner. Actively create space for the voices of all. Focus on the issues. Be open to other perspectives, opinions, and ideas. Arrive prepared and on time for all meetings. Review materials for accuracy and credibility. So those are all the same, nothing changed there. We've got some new stuff though. So this is what we're calling email etiquette, okay? And this is extremely important, so please pay attention. So last week and today, we had some emails go out that were very confusing to several members of this work group. So we've been getting emails Friday, over the weekend, today, asking us if we had sent emails from the task force. So basically what we're going to ask you guys to do is to cease sending large group emails. Let's try to not create these there was an email that went out about using Slack. We understand that people are trying to collaborate, trying to work together, and we want to encourage that. But be careful not to mislead folks. We've had folks say, hey, do I need to join that in order to be on the work group? Do I have to sign up for Slack, or do I have to respond to this person's email? And the answer to those questions is no, those are not coming from us. So just to reiterate, the email that myself and the co-chairs are using is New Jersey Forest Task Force at gmail.com. If it doesn't come from there, it's not coming from us, okay? So in addition to that, as I said, don't send mass emails to the entire work group. Refrain from sending reply all responses to task force wide emails. Do not forward work group emails to contacts outside the work group. So we were really clear in the beginning, these work groups require some participation. They require some commitment. And so the folks that are committed are the folks that signed up and that are on this call. So we're not just going to email this out to people who didn't seem interested or didn't sign up. So we would ask you to do the same thing. Don't forward these out to people outside of our work group. Also, do not send attachments and information via email unless requested. So there's going to be an opportunity, you'll hear about this a little bit later, about how we're going to receive materials. There's going to be a very purposeful way, a specific way to do that. Any material submitted outside that process will not be reviewed. So moving forward, don't send us emails with attachments, with long, paragraph. We're not reading those. We don't have time to read those. So there's going to be a process to submit information. Also, we've got some guidelines for Zoom. So don't share the Zoom links with people outside of the work group. Again, for obvious reasons, they didn't sign up to participate. They didn't sign up to make a commitment. We're trying to make this a group that is kind of all in, is listening at the meetings and able to participate. These are unique work group members for participation. Also, we expect your full attention and participation in the meetings. Please avoid external conversations or distractions. So work with me here. I'm going to do a quick little illustration. All of you guys have been in a classroom setting at some point, or a lecture in college or high school, whatever. It's obvious when folks are not listening to the speaker, right? They're asleep. That was me sometimes in college. They're talking or chatting amongst themselves, or maybe they're texting and they're looking down at their phone, right? They're not paying attention to the speaker. So this is where Zoom is great, but you can do all those things and nobody will even know about it, right? So you can be having all these side conversations and nobody knows what's going on. But essentially the same thing is taking place, right? Participants are distracted and they're not listening to the presenter or the speaker. And if we're going to be successful at all, I think we have to refrain from a lot of these side conversations and try to really focus in on the speaker who kind of has the floor. And at some point, that's probably going to be you speaking. So give respect to the speaker and you will get it in return. So, and again, just quickly, we've disabled the chat function for the most part on these Zoom calls for that reason. We don't want this big distraction on the side, having this other conversation. So just do your best. Give your attention to whoever's speaking. The last point is removal of participants. So, and just so you know, this is something we revised. We listen to your feedback. We do read your feedback. And there was some discussion about the removal of participants. So what we've done here is we've just made it a in-house thing for the 4 co-chairs. We will be making the decisions about participants and if their behavior is is not fitting for our work group, and we will ask them to not be part of it. So wanton or repeated violation of our expectations is ground for removal from the work group. So we don't want to remove folks, guys. We want everybody to participate. That is not our desire, but we have to do that. We've got to move this conversation along. We don't have time for tons and tons of distractions. So, and I'm going to totally go off script here just for a few minutes and kind of speak from my heart. The other co-chairs have no idea, but I know, I think that they would agree with what I'm going to say. So we are humbled and grateful to be tasked with leading this task force. And further, we are very grateful for your participation in these work groups and in this process. But I have news for you. We are 4 very imperfect people. Anjali is extremely close to perfect, but not quite there. But the rest of us are imperfect. And therefore we've come up with an imperfect process. There is no template for what we're doing. There's no manual. We're consulting with certain people. We're looking at different resources, but essentially the 4 of us are kind of creating this process as we go. Furthermore, just to be clear, none of us ran for this position. We're not getting paid. We are volunteers with regular day jobs. We don't even really have any intern help. So I'm thankful for people like Taylor and other folks who are helping us, but we don't really have any full-time help doing this with us. So we're going to do the best we can to conduct this process in the best way that we know how. When Senator Smith charged us, he did not give us any real guardrails, but he entrusted things to the 4 of us. And I say all that to say, you won't always agree with the way we're doing things. I am certain of that. And I'm okay with that. We're all 4 of us are okay with that. Not everyone would do things the way we are doing them. But we were given authority by Senator Smith to manage the conversation. So moving forward, we would just ask that you would be careful with criticism and suggestions about our process or seek to undermine our process. And further, if you can't submit to the process we've come up with, I would suggest you go ahead and step away. It is not going to serve the group. And we don't have time to debate the process. We'll never get anywhere. We need to move on to the issues related to our forest. So again, we don't want to remove anybody, but if you can't submit to the process that we've created and the rules we've created, we'll have to ask you to step away. And then the second point I would make is we can have a civilized conversation. So, Anjali, myself, Tom, and Eileen, we come at things from totally different angles, totally different perspectives, different backgrounds, different education, different experience, but we get along great. We respect one another. I have never heard anyone shout another member of the co-chairs down or say anything disrespectful or raise their voice or anything of the sort. So what I've seen is kindness, respect, and teamwork from the 4 of us. And it can be done. So I'm kind of making an appeal to you on behalf of my co-chairs to let's have a civilized and meaningful conversation about our forest. I know we can do it. So with that, Anjali, it's on you.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, everybody. Andy, thanks for that great explanation of our rules and that message from your heart.
You're welcome.
So, okay, everybody. So up next, we have New Jersey DEP, and we asked New Jersey DEP to come join us again because we are interested to hear what they have to say, what they're doing in regards to all things climate change, all things carbon sequestration. It obviously makes sense to sort of understand where we are in the state. New Jersey DEP it's the best agency or the best people to give us the foundation where we can start or what's going on. So I'm going to introduce the New Jersey DEP team. Lauren Gasertwitz. I hope I pronounce your last name, Lauren, correctly.
Gasertwitz. You're close.
Thank you so much. She's going to be leading the climate conversation, and she will give us an awesome presentation. Then we have Bill Sipsey. We have Bernie Isaacson and Courtney Willits and Todd Wyckoff. So as I said, Lauren will be giving the presentation, but we have here a team where we can ask different technical questions, different big picture questions, and then we'll take questions at the end of Lauren's presentation. But it's really awesome that we have a technical resource here to ask clarifying questions or to know more about different issues that we might have not known. So Lauren, with that, please take it away.
All right, thank you very much, Angeli. Let me just make sure I can share this. Okay, can you all see my PowerPoint? Yep, everyone's good. Okay, cool. So hi, everyone. Again, my name is Lauren Gazerwitz, and I am a carbon and climate forester with the New Jersey State Forest Service. And we were asked to speak to you all today about climate change in the state. And I just want to start by saying this is a really big topic to cover in 15 minutes. And each of these slides could probably be a presentation on their own. So this is going to be a relatively broad overview. And I figured we would start with the building blocks of climate change here and start with the question, what's carbon got to do with it? So carbon dioxide is a highly consequential human-made greenhouse gas that's really closely linked to climate change. New Jersey's Global Warming Response Act, or the 80x50 report, set a goal for reducing emissions of carbon dioxide equivalent, which is carbon dioxide plus other greenhouse gases, to 80% below their 2006 levels by the year 2050. So we can see in this graphic on the right, the breakdown of greenhouse gas sources and sinks in New Jersey. So the transportation sector, which is this big blue block at the top, includes the transport of both people and the transport of goods, and it's the biggest emitter in the state. And then if we look all the way at the bottom of this graphic, this darker green box here, we can see that that's terrestrial sinks for the state, which includes forests. And those terrestrial sinks sequester approximately 8% of the state's total greenhouse gas emissions. So this means that the state's natural features sequestered more carbon than was generated by the waste sector in that same year. And one of our goals is to increase that 8% sequestration rate by managing our forests with carbon in mind. So before we get more into detail on carbon within New Jersey's forests, I'm going to go over some of the key concepts and definitions that are kind of associated with carbon and climate. So there are a bunch of different ways to measure and describe carbon statistics. So it's really important to know what units you're using or comparing to each other. So for example, let's talk about this adorable hippo here. An average female hippo weighs 1.5 tons. But if we were using metric tons to describe her, we would say that she is 1.36 metric tons. Now, if we converted her weight to metric tons of biomass, she's 0.41 metric tons. And if we peeled carbon out of that number, she's 0.2 metric tons of carbon. Finally, if we wanted to convert that to carbon dioxide equivalent, we would describe her as a 0.75 metric tons. So you can see that the same exact hippo here can be described using very different numbers. All of them are correct, but they're just in different units. So in the carbon world, we're often talking in tons, metric tons, and metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, which you can see here come out as very different numbers once you convert them. So again, just keep in mind, it's really important to understand what units you're speaking in and to keep them consistent. So next we'll talk about carbon flux versus carbon pools, or sequestration versus storage. So flux or sequestration is the movement of carbon from one pool to another, and carbon pools are areas where carbon can be stored for extended periods of time. So you can see in this top box that's labeled flux that the red and black arrows are showing carbon flux or movement through the ecosystem. And the box on the bottom that's labeled as a pool is highlighting carbon pools, in this case, vegetation, where carbon can remain for an extended period of time. So it's important to note that the rate of sequestration can change really dramatically based on different conditions, like what season it is, how healthy your tree is, and any disturbances that have occurred. And that carbon pools themselves can remain intact for short periods of time, or they can remain intact for centuries. I'm also going to quickly touch on the concept of carbon leakage and the associated trade-offs of that. And this is one of those slides that we could spend an hour talking about, so I'll try my best to fit it all in. Carbon leakage occurs when there is an increase in greenhouse gas emissions in one area as a result of an emissions reduction in a second area. So for example, in this top left photo here, we can see stacks of firewood at a local New Jersey store. I see these stacks of firewood at many local New Jersey stores. And on closer inspection of the label, we can see that this firewood is actually from Latvia, so it's not locally sourced. So in this situation, Latvia would take the carbon emission hit for producing firewood instead of New Jersey. And you might be thinking, that's great, we can keep our carbon here and let somebody else, emit theirs. But it still stands that there's still demand for that product here, whether or not we supply it ourselves. And that brings us to the concept of trade-offs. So again, it might sound great that we're preserving more of our local carbon by outsourcing things like firewood or switching from wooden building and construction materials to other materials. But in actuality, the carbon footprint of outsourcing is often much larger when you factor in things like the emissions associated with like transporting those materials overseas, or the emissions associated with making steel beams or concrete to make buildings, or plastic or metals for furniture. And something that many people may not realize is that using wood products as a building material for houses or for furniture or cabinets is actually a really great way for us to keep the carbon from that wood stored for the life of that product. Leakage can also put an economic and carbon burden on the product provider. So for example, a poorer country may need the income that's granted to them by shipping out wood products, but that can incentivize ecological exploitation of that area as well. So in order to minimize carbon leakage, we need to begin to think more locally when it comes to our wood products. So now we'll move on to what carbon looks like in New Jersey. And just a quick aside that all of this data comes from the USDA Forest Service Forest Inventory and Analysis Program, which is a nationally recognized and publicly available data source. Our forests have 5 different carbon pools, which include live above ground carbon, which is all of our plant and tree stems, our branches and our leaves. Then we have the live below ground pool, which is our roots. We have deadwood, litter, and soil pools. And our 2 largest carbon pools are the above ground live pool and the soil pool. Now, it's important to note that when something in the above ground pool dies, that carbon isn't all released back into the atmosphere, but is mostly transferred, think flux, to the dead pool or the litter pool. Now, if we wanted to look at total tons of carbon per acre across the state, it looks like this map on the right. So the darker the color, the more carbon there is per acre. And we can see here that the highlands, sourlands, and pinelands, which are all highlighted here in red, green, and yellow, all have really large sums of carbon, as these are the regions of the state that have the most trees present. So this graph shows the breakdown of carbon flux. So again, the movement of carbon between pools across some of New Jersey's forest type groups. And we're gonna focus mostly on this yellow column that's highlighted at the end. That's the total flux in the state per acre per year. And we can see that the gross growth per acre, so this green bar here, across the state outweighs the mortality and also outweighs harvesting by a 7-to-1 ratio. So for every 7 trees that we get in the state that grow in the state, only 1 is removed. And again, just because a tree has died doesn't mean that all of that stored carbon disappeared. It's mostly just been transferred again from that live pool to the deadwood pool. And even harvested trees can have carbon continue to be stored again in long-lived products, long-lived wood products. So to come back around full circle to how carbon is influenced by forests and how that links to climate change, it's important to note that what happens with climate change is our choice. So there are so many human and climate related things that can cause really large emission events or make our forests less adapted to future climate conditions. So whether it be forest conversion to other uses like development, invasive insect outbreaks like southern pine beetle or emerald ash borer, disruption of ecological functions, wildfires, or flooding events, there are things that we can do now to make our forests more resilient so that when these things do happen, our forests are less impacted by them. So again, we want our forests to be healthy and resilient, and the best way to accomplish that is through balanced and diverse management. So think of it like baking a cake. The cake won't taste that great if we're missing some of the ingredients, or it might not cook properly if you don't have the correct tools to cook it in. So if we're baking the cake for someone who's gluten-free or diabetic, we have the ability to swap out some of those ingredients for others, like we can swap all-purpose flour for almond flour or sugar for Splenda and still have a delicious cake. The same thought process applies to managing our forests. So using the same management technique in every forest and in every situation would be like trying to bake a cake with just flour. It wouldn't work. So climate change is going to affect our different forest types in a variety of ways. So like think southern pine beetle outbreak could be your gluten-free friend, or mesophication could be our diabetic friend. And those cakes have to be baked a certain way or they won't work. So we have to have a diversity of management techniques and tools to best address current and future forest issues. So what kind of carbon conscious management techniques do we utilize in the Forest Service? So in order to keep our forests healthy and resilient, we use management techniques such as forest restoration, avoided emissions through risk mitigation, improved forest management, and afforestation, so creating forests where there historically was no forest, and reforestation, and by working really hard to keep forests as forests. And finally, here are some resources that you can access for data or for more information. And I want to specifically call out the USDA Forest Service Forest Inventory and Analysis Program, which I mentioned earlier, and it's a program that New Jersey invests a lot in, and it's a nationally recognized and publicly available, really consistent source of forest and forest carbon data. And we use it frequently in our analyses. I'll also point to the New Jersey State Forest Action Plan, the Wildlife Action Plan, the Global Warming Response Act, the 80x50 report, and the Climate Change Resilience Strategy. These are all publicly available online if you wanted to look up any of them and get a better idea of kind of the strategies that different aspects of DEP and the state are looking at when it comes to climate. And finally, me and my team, so Bill Zipsey, Bernie Isaacson, and Courtney Willits, we are all here and available to answer any questions that you guys might have.
Taylor, I think since you are the one getting the
Yeah,
questions, please
sure.
go.
So, okay, we have a question from Sue Dord. What percentage of carbon harvested in New Jersey ends up in long-lived products?
All right, it looks like we are not actually sure as to the exact number of that, so I don't want to give you incorrect information.
Okay, let's see. Are old forests better at carbon sequestering than young stages of old forests?
Can you unmute Bill Zipsey? He has a good response for that one.
Sorry about that. So I mean, that is a good question in terms of old forest better at sequestering carbon than younger stages of forest. The answer to that, as Lauren alluded to in the presentation, is it really depends, right? There's a lot of differences among different types of forests, whether they're, upland forests, wetland forests, what their soil is comprised of, the life cycle of the trees in that forest. So I hate to say that it depends, but it does. It depends. So there, and it depends again when we talk about sequester. Remember what Lauren talked about of flux versus storing too. And that's not just to say, I know the adage tends to be that older forests store carbon more stably and younger forests pull more carbon out of the air more rapidly. But again, that depends. That depends on a lot of factors. So it depends if you're talking about the rate at which carbon is being taken out of the air versus the amount being stored for long periods of time in a stable fashion. So in short, that there are a lot of variables in that. There are ways that we can evaluate that and report it. There are ways that we can model it, and there are ways that we can model trade-offs relative to different choices that are made on the landscape or different reactions to the landscape to pressures that are being placed on it.
And can you define old and young forests?
That is a good question as well. So actually, many of you who have been following national news know that the federal government is struggling with the very same thing. So there's a lot of talk in terms of definitions for that. We tend to think of things in terms of maturity in the forestry world, and that is not an economic term. We thinking about it in the ecological sense. So looking at the life cycle and life stages of different tree species and different forest types. So for example, certain early successional types like aspen, an 80-year-old aspen stand is relatively old. An 80-year-old oak stand is not very old at all, right? And an 80-year-old Atlantic white cedar stand is not particularly old at all. So again, I hate to answer it with it depends, but it does depend in terms of what is an old or mature forest. Also, different systems manifest differently. I'll be talking to this a little bit with the discussing the ecology of forest, but in terms of succession, so certain forest types replace other forest types as a forest matures. And some systems are stable, or we'll get to a more stable condition that way, and some do not. So it depends on the selective pressures that have been placed on that system. I hope that answers your question.
Does New Jersey participate in carbon offset markets as a viable opportunity for landowners to monetize carbon sequestration in forests through California-based Climate Action Reserve, CAR?
I mean, I can take a crack at this unless somebody else wants to. So New Jersey is involved in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which is a cap and trade system. We are investigating avenues to trade on the California exchanges. As a government entity, we tend to be a little bit slower to adopt some of these things, but we have been exploring. There's a couple different ways to get involved in the voluntary exchanges, and we're trying to find a system that has baselines that are suitable for the types of ecological management that the citizens of New Jersey are interested in pursuing. So I guess in short, we are not trading in voluntary markets on public property yet. There are some private landowners that are, and we are part of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative cap and trade system, which is a regulatory instrument.
Okay. Question from Joe Bazralian. Recent papers have seriously undermined the view that using forest products for building materials stores a significant percentage of carbon as compared to an intact forest. Can you comment?
You're muted.
Sorry, Bill accidentally muted himself again. He's trying to answer.
Bill, I'm asking you to unmute yourself. Oh, try again, sorry.
Sorry, we're all in the same building here.
Yeah.
There
So
you go.
when there's pauses, we're trying to figure out who's going to answer.
I think I'm gonna unmute all of you and then just say unmute it, and then please go ahead and answer the question.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry. Can we repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. So recent papers have seriously undermined the view that using forest products for building materials stores a significant percentage of carbon as compared to an intact forest. Can you comment?
Okay, I see Bernie saying he's interested in answering this one, so I'm gonna let him go. Oh, now he can unmute. Sorry.
There we go.
There we go.
Bernie, okay, great.
All right, now you can hear me. Yeah, so there are a couple of different things to think about here. So the fate of that carbon isn't necessarily, it's not a binary choice between, well, it's not as long lived, or there's emissions associated with it if it's some sort of durable wood product. And it's not a binary choice between that and leaving alone the forest, right? I think everyone agrees. Everyone here would agree that the thing that's constant is change. And the alternatives to the forest, as Bill alluded to and as Lauren stated, I think that different forest types are going to have different risks associated with them, different longevities with individual species, and so the notion that it just comes down to, well, does it last longer in one pool or another, I think is a little bit oversimplifying the problem. There are other materials, sort of, that Lauren alluded to or stated about steel, about concrete, right? That those wood products, there's still a demand for building materials. There's still a demand for wood products. Just because we don't necessarily grow the 2x4s that show up at Home Depot here doesn't mean that New Jerseyans aren't using them, and that they're not associated with any sort of emissions. So yeah, there's research. I would say there's research that would argue that the life cycle analysis, depending on how you do the budgeting, is just fine for durable wood products. And there's certainly research that argues otherwise. I think the way to think about it is that there's a whole bunch of different factors involved. And if we're playing an accounting game, recognize that that's not necessarily doing anything to help climate, right? The thing that we're trying to do is help climate. And so accounting becomes really important. And it's not as simple as just saying like, well, the wood, the carbon in those wood products is lost. If that's an okay answer. Hopefully that satisfies the question.
Okay, I'm just getting a lot of questions, so I'm trying to do it as fast as possible. We have another question that says the study of let's see, hold on, I just lost it. The study of carbon stored in wood products in Oregon showed that 91% of the carbon from trees used produce the wood products ended in landfills or the atmosphere. Can you comment on the percentage in New Jersey? Bill, you're mute. Okay.
Yeah, Bill, you're still muted. Essentially, we don't actually have that number of that percentage of like the carbon that remains in wood products in New Jersey. But again, like Bernie was just saying, it's not necessarily, I'm just trying to figure out how to phrase this the proper way in my head. Regardless of whether or not like there's the maximum amount of carbon stored in a wood product, suffice it to say the demand for those wood products is still there within the state. And to have some carbon stored in a wood product versus to emit a ton of carbon making materials like steel or concrete and then having those things transported to us, the carbon footprint for that is much larger. So from our perspective, we're just trying to say that, looking into local wood sources could be beneficial to us in the long run, in the larger perspective of like the global carbon footprint.
I'll also speak to, I suspect, and I don't know which study from Oregon, but I suspect it probably comes from some of the works of Jerry Franklin, who we reference and respect quite a bit. But some of the work that's referencing is taking place in the developing world, where there is more waste in terms of being able to process the wood products effectively. Because I've heard numbers like that coming out of that research in particular that was looking at wood utilization in the developing world. So that would be something to keep in mind. Also, remember that the carbon footprints of wood products depends on a lot of things. It depends on what the wood products are replacing and the carbon footprint of their production in the first place. And it also comes at a trade-off, right? So for instance, you could do things like whole tree harvesting, which is could potentially be very, very efficient, but it also has other ecological consequences on things like nutrient cycling. So we kind of play this balancing act between those things. I can tell you, and I would have to look into some of the UN recommendations that talk about wood utilization worldwide, looking at some of these problems. Again, it's kind of a complex problem between economic problems and ecological problems, because you can exert pressure on one part of the system and have unintended consequences elsewhere. I know Canada, the Canadian government's done some research into using things like, for instance, cross-laminated timber in their building codes, and that's actually that actually looks quite promising in terms of carbon storage over the long term. And you don't necessarily need as the grades of wood, even though it's like building grade wood, is because of the way it's treated and put together, doesn't require, you can actually more efficiently use the wood for very, very long-term carbon storage. So I think, again, I hate to say that the answer to a lot of these questions is it depends, but that is very, very true in the carbon world. If it's very easy to oversimplify these things, and there is analysis that's necessary to be able to understand how you're actually impacting a global issue, because climate change is a global issue. So understanding like what you're doing here, how that's going to impact other places in the globe. And there are methods to do that. That's why we have this very close relationship with USDA.
Just to follow up on that. Oh, sorry. Okay, go for
I
it.
guess I would also add that there are certainly reasons, ecological reasons to manage forests for other benefits, that aren't primarily driven by durable wood products and things like that. So, keeping that in mind in the conversation with trade-offs, when you have disturbance-dependent ecosystems like New Jersey does, there certainly are a plethora of ecological reasons to manage the forest as well.
And just following up on that, Janine Fox asked, couldn't New Jersey do a study like Oregon study?
So again, if thinking it is the if it's the work in Franklin, that actually wasn't a study on life cycle in Oregon. We are working with the feds for looking at life cycle analysis though, here regionally, because also you got to remember wood flow. A lot of New Jersey's the markets and how wood flows through New Jersey has to do with logistics because we're a port state. So we are talking about having a regional analysis here, looking at how durable wood products and wood products flow through New Jersey, into New Jersey, and out of New Jersey. Yes.
Janine, I just ask you to unmute yourself so you can clarify what study you're referring
Well,
to.
no, and it's Jean, by the way, not
Jean, sorry.
But anyhow, I'm old, you don't know me. I mean, DEP is really good. You guys are great there, but I obviously need to keep up on this. But obviously Canada, Oregon, the Northwestern states and others, I would assume that them plus the US government, you keep up on their studies. So, I mean, are there studies, for instance, like the Oregon or like something Canada's doing or somebody else who's California, who's a leader in this, that you think that we should have done for New Jersey that we don't yet have done? Because that is something that this group could recommend.
So I can tell you, yes, the lake states have done something like this, and it was very informative in terms of it was very informative in terms of movement of wood products among the states and into other countries. I also think when Lauren referred to the leakage issue too, that gives you a lot of insight into where the biggest parts of that problem, because don't assume, you making assumptions about where things are going it's very dangerous to do that.
Right.
But yeah, so there are, in fact, New Jersey, it was a part of a, was it 17 state grant agreement. And we do have data from that using an economist, because when we don't have the expertise specifically within New Jersey, we will join forces with other states. And we do have the results from that analysis, and we're trying to go through that. That study was only completed maybe 2 years ago. So we're trying to go through that, but that was an analysis that was done using data from New Jersey, but also data from 17 states in this region, including the lake states that have some experience doing the type of analysis you're talking about. So we're hoping to have some answers.
Just a brief follow-up. I know DEP is short-staffed, so I think this group could recommend certain things for the agency, specifically through maybe the senator or whatever, to hire needs that you have, or to specifically have somebody else who has the expertise and the staffing to do studies for New Jersey, for you guys.
Yes, and I will say also, I'll just throw this out there, that also our staff, we do have a tremendous analytical staff that's absolutely willing to help in terms of answering these types of questions. And then where we recognize there's expertise beyond what we have here, we do have agreements with other states and the federal government and academia. And we're trying to branch out in those directions too, understanding that some of that talent may not be in government even, that we can pull from.
All right, thank you, Jean, so much for your questions. Thank you everybody for the questions, but we're running out of time. So what we're going to do is we've gathered all of your questions and we will redirect all of them to the New Jersey DEP team, and we will answer all of the questions for you guys. But we still have half of the agenda left. So I'm just gonna continue. Ken, I see that you have your hand raised. Can you please direct your question to Taylor, and then we will make sure that we ask your question. All right, so next on the agenda is the work group structure and participant roles. So I'm going to, oh, and by the way, thank you, New Jersey DEP, for the great conversation, for the presentation. Someone asked if we will make available the presentation. We will. So, this is all being recorded. As we did with the first meeting, we will provide the link to the recording of this meeting, and we will provide all of the materials that we're sharing. So if you need to go back to that presentation, that's available. So process, how are we going to tackle this task force? There's so many people that are interested. All of you have very important issues that we all want to hear about and we all want to tackle. So we've come up with the proposal system. So the proposal is we're going to have like a Google form, which Andy is going to go above and beyond in detail later on, and provide us with an example of how you fill out that proposal form. So essentially, we're going to receive proposals for both work groups, for the climate work group and the ecological health work group. And we ask you to submit a proposal for each individual issue. So you might be concerned or interested in 3 different issues. So we ask that you submit 3 different proposals so that we can digest in an easier way the topic and the issue. So in the proposal, we ask that you provide like a 1-pager. I believe it's like 2,500 words. Eileen, give me the thumbs up if that's correct. I think it's 2,500. Go ahead, Eileen.
2,500 characters.
Characters. It's like a 1-pager, give it or take. Thank you, Eileen. So we want you to put in that 1-pager, straight to the point, what is the issue that you would like the task force to consider, to discuss, to go over the scientific literature, the data, so that we can reach consensus. As we've explained before, the main mission and the charge from Senator Smith is to reach items for consensus so that we can show that and present those issues to the legislature so that they can use those items and those issues to design and draft legislation. We are not a regulatory entity. We have no authority. So that's very important for all of you to know. We are here essentially as messengers of what New Jersey stakeholders and people that are interested in the protection of our forests would like to suggest to the legislature. So proposals, one specific issue, we encourage collaboration. So if you want to work with various members of this work group or another work group in developing a topic or an issue, we encourage that. There's been some emails where you can see the email addresses, but we actually encourage you to do that communication because we don't want to, keep sharing your information. So please go ahead and reach out to each other amongst yourselves. And as I said, we encourage collaboration between organizations, between private residents, you name it, to make those proposals even stronger. We want to see proposals that are based in science. So that Google form that we will share with everybody has a way that you can attach supporting documentation. There's 2 different ways that you can do this. There's a section for peer review articles, and that's our priority, right? We want to base all of our recommendations to the legislature based on data and science, not opinion based. However, we've added an additional way for all of you to submit information. For example, agency reports or articles in the New York Times or like Washington Post, things like that sort of reference also studies and literature. It's just like more indirect way. We also encourage for you to submit those type of supporting information. Oftentimes, peer review articles are behind a paywall. So if you have a link to an article that not everybody has access to, please go ahead and get that PDF article and please attach it to the Google form so that we have access to it. Because at the end of it all, what we're going to do, and we expect hopefully not 100 proposals, but given that we are asking everybody to do a proposal per issue, it wouldn't surprise us if we end up with 100 proposals. So what we're going to do is group them by topic. So let's say 20 proposals came back with fire management in regards to climate change. So what we're going to do is that we're going to designate one of our scheduled meetings to discuss fire management in regards to climate change, and we will discuss those 20 proposals. So that's why we encourage collaboration, because if you have the similar ideas to another organization and you're aware of this, or other private residents and you're aware of this, we encourage you to submit this proposal together. We have a way for you to say, the various organizations or the various individuals that are in support of this proposal. And so for our scheduled meetings, which we will go through the dates at the end of this meeting, we will ask the supporters or the authors of these proposals to go over them, have a little bit of time to explain to the work group what their issue or their concern is about. And so we encourage the discussion. As New Jersey DEP mentioned, we have them as a resource. Maybe there's some data that we don't have accessible, or maybe it is easier for them to give us this data. We can tap into that in a controlled way, right? Because we don't want to overburden New Jersey DEP. They have so much work to do as it is. And so we are going to do 2 rounds of proposals. So what we have in mind, and we're going to share this link very soon with you guys, is that you submit a proposal, and the deadline for the first round is the end of June. So we're giving you about a month to develop your proposal. You can ask us questions if you have questions, of course. Andy and me, we're here for the climate group. Eileen and Tom are there for the ecological health group. And so you have a month. And then after that, as I said, we will gather all of the information, all the supporting information. We will group proposals together. We will determine when we are going to discuss these proposals throughout, the summertime and the fall. And so it is very important to note that we will prioritize proposals that are all based on science and data, not opinions. So the stronger you make your proposal with a lot of peer review articles or just science in general, the higher the importance, right? Because that's really what we want to show the legislature. Issues based on science that New Jersey residents and organizations support, reaching consensus. So then the second round of proposals will have a deadline by the end of August. And so what we anticipate this second round of proposals is to go more into details of proposals from the first round. Maybe we can dive deeper, or missing issues or different things that we might have missed in the first round of proposals. And that would have, I think I just said this, but just in case, the deadline for that would be at the end of August. And I think we pretty much have the meeting dates up until the fall. And so we will, like I said, we will go through that at the end of the meeting. Andy, did I miss anything? I think we're pretty much good on the proposal side.
No, you did a great job, and I'll be circling back to show everybody that actual form where they will submit the Google form. So,
Yeah.
and just keep in mind, guys, we're gonna, as we've already said, this is all being recorded. So there's going to be clarification that you need. You may need to go back and listen, and there's going to be some emails that come out with the Google form for these submissions of proposals. And then also we're going to be sending something out. Angela, you mentioned earlier, and I saw a question real quick pop up about an organization designating a certain individual for their group or whatever. So there'll be another form relative to that as well. So
we'll
try to
discuss that later on. Yeah.
Yep. So
I think that's good. So go ahead, Andy.
Yeah, no, great job. So now I'm just going to quickly cover the process for consensus. So we've said this a number of times, but the goal, kind of back to Senator Smith's charge, is to come back with a report of consensus and non-consensus items. So I'm going to be positive and focus on the consensus items. Okay. That's our goal. So we're working towards consensus. We're striving for consensus, and dare I say, we're fighting for consensus. No, we're just going to work hard for consensus. That's what we're trying to do. So as Anjali shared, we are asking you to come up with proposals, to collaborate with others, to submit these proposals for the work group to then discuss, right? Now, as we're discussing these items, we're looking for consensus. What does consensus mean or not mean? Consensus does not mean 100 out of 100 people agree 100% exactly with a proposal necessarily. But we're looking for a vast, vast majority of folks to be kind of on the same page. Like an overwhelming majority, right? So ideally, these are the items that are going to go into this report that we are going to share with Senator Smith that may eventually find their way into legislation, right? Are these consensus items? So that's what we want to spend a lot of our time on, is trying to build consensus around some of these items, okay? But we're also not naive. We will disagree. When I say we, the group, the work group members will have items that they don't agree on, right? They're going to be on different ends here. So we've kind of created 3 categories, we call it. We kind of have our consensus items, our non-consensus items, where we have a lot of disagreement, very polarizing topic potentially. And then we kind of have our in the middle, where we're kind of like, you know what, we've got a pretty good majority. And maybe we even vote on that item to kind of see where we're at, okay? Anjali is going to talk a little bit more about the voting part, but we don't want to get too hung up on that. We want to really press for this consensus idea. So if you take away anything from my little conversation here, it's the consensus item, not the voting and things like that. So keep in mind too, just one thing we want to stress: in all things, everybody will have an opportunity to share their point of view and it be documented. So even and reported. So even when there's a consensus item, and let's say there's 100 people and there's one person who can't get on board with a certain proposal, you're still going to have an opportunity to communicate your opposition to that item, that proposal, and that's going to go in our report that we present to the senator. So we don't ever want you to feel like your voice is not important and we're not hearing you. Your voice is important, and it will be documented in the report, okay? So again, as an example, if you're all by yourself on an island by yourself on an issue, you're going to have a chance to at least put that in the report. Let's see. So a couple of kind of tactical things that myself and Anjali and Eileen and Tom are talking about for their group is kind of how we wade through these things. So some kind of things we might consider are, so when we have these consensus items, or we have a large group of people who are kind of on one side and there's a small group on the other, we might ask this smaller group, like, hey, can you live with this proposal over here? There seems to be a consensus forming over here. Would you be able to kind of tolerate this or kind of bite your tongue, whatever the expression is, and kind of let this topic move on so we can get to the next topic? So that may be something we ask of the group to kind of consider at times. Another tactic might be, if we feel like we're close to consensus, but we're close, but more work needs to be done, we might ask the sponsor of the proposal. So if I put a proposal together, I'm not going to do this, but if I put a proposal together, Anjali might come to me or my group and say, hey, would you consider tweaking your proposal a little bit, changing some verbiage so that it might pull a few more people into your camp there to move this to a consensus item? So that might be something we do. And then lastly, we might also set up subcommittees. So if we have an issue that we feel like we think there could be an opportunity to move to consensus, but there's just still some conversation to be had, we're kind of considering this idea of creating maybe a smaller subcommittee to go do a little more work, do a little more research, and come back to the full work group with some more information, maybe a modified proposal, whatever that might be. So again, as I stated in the beginning, there's no perfect way for this process to play out. It's going to be evolving and changing kind of as we go, and no two proposals are going to be the same. So we're going to be kind of processing, Anjali and I kind of thinking through them together and how best to handle them. So and our goal is to hear as many of them as possible and to work through as many as we can. So back to you, Anjali.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. And also, someone raised a really good question. Obviously, ecological health, climate change group, there's going to be some topics that are going to come up that are, they're the same, but with different sort of lenses, right? Ecological health versus climate. How are we not going to conflict in whatever we decide or when we reach consensus? So to avoid that, as you see right now, Eileen and Tom are both here present in this meeting. Andy and myself, we will be present in all ecological health meetings. If something that is opposite of what has been decided in the other group arises, or it is the conclusion for consensus, we will immediately flag that. We are there to facilitate conversation as well, and to carry over the message from the other group. Also, I'm sure many of you are participants of both groups. So, we have open communication. So we're going to be on top of that, and we're well aware. All right, so I think for presentation for consensus and voting, I'm going to stress yet again what Andy has said and what I've said many times. The goal is to reach consensus. If the legislature is going to look into our report and it's going to see 60 items that have reached consensus, guess what? They're going to go for that. They're not going to go with the ones that went into a vote and maybe it's like a 50-50 thing or like a 60-40. They're going to go with what they see New Jersey residents, New Jersey organizations are fully on board. So that's why we really want to achieve consensus with as many issues as possible. So, but as Andy said, we're not naive. We're obviously expecting to have conflicting opinions on different issues. So we are still debating in terms of, well, we as in like the four co-chairs, we're still discussing how we're going to weight everybody. And the reason why we're still discussing this is because, like I said, we don't really want to go into the vote. We want to reach consensus. But this is how we're thinking, how we're going to do this. So we're going to have businesses, LLCs, or any for-profit organizations together. So they represent essentially the same thing. We're going to have private residents. And we're going to have organizations, as you've seen in the agenda. We're going to have two different types of organizations. We're going to have small, which is less than 25, less than 25 staff and members, or over 25 total staff and members. That would be a large organization. So what we ask of you is, if you represent an organization, we want one individual, one specific person to represent that organization. So I'm going to use Sierra Club as an example. I'm the director. Oh, but FYI, for the sake of transparency and for avoiding conflict, the four co-chairs are not going to be voting on any matters of consensus. Each organization, our organizations, will pick one specific person, just one person for both work groups to be voting for our organizations. So I'm just going to throw it out there for Sierra Club. Taylor McFarland will be doing the voting for both climate change and ecological health. So in the same way that Sierra Club is doing this, we ask everybody that represents an organization to send a letter with letterhead and everything, like a formal document to us that's going to say, this person, Bill Smith, whoever, Bill Smith will be representing XY organization in New Jersey, and we are a small organization based on your threshold on New Jersey Task Force, or we are a large organization based on your threshold. To make things a bit easier, we've also created a Google form that we will be sharing in a few days that you can submit all of this information and attach the letter. So again, one individual will represent each organization, because as you can imagine, Sierra Club is a really big organization, and we don't want thousands and thousands of people voting for Sierra Club, whereas a small organization maybe just has 20 people, and then so that doesn't really make sense, right? So we want one person per organization. And for example, if this organization has volunteer leadership like Sierra Club, or different staff members, you cannot just go and vote as a private resident, because that's still double dipping, that's manipulating numbers. So we want to avoid that. We want only one person per organization to do the voting. If you are a member of Sierra Club, we have many members, but you're not a volunteer leader, you don't participate in the policy setting of Sierra Club, please go ahead and identify yourself as a private resident. And the same thing applies for all organizations. You're not a staff member, you're not a volunteer leader, you can go ahead and register yourself as a private resident. Otherwise, you cannot. And we're just trying to, be transparent and be just with everybody here, because we know we have so many different organizations of many different, numbers. Let me see. So I think
Questions, Anjali. We're gonna do questions next. Yeah.
yes. Yeah. So I
Yep.
think I cover everything so far with the, and we'll get back to you as to how we're going to weight things for the vote, but please keep in mind. And also, I want to clarify something that I just keep thinking. When I said that we're going to prioritize the more science, the better, essentially, to make your proposal stronger, just keep in mind, if we get 100 proposals, for an example, but we have a limited amount of meetings, we need to find a way of prioritizing the most important ones. And that's why I say we're going to prioritize collaboration. We're going to prioritize, the more groups, the more private residents joining together in one issue, even better. So that's how we're seeing things. That's our process. So we're going to open for questions. Taylor, please.
Yeah. Hey, Eileen and Tom could probably be on the lookout here. We may need your input.
Yes.
Sure. So Sarah Webb asked, does each proposal only deal with one issue, or would a proposal cover multiple issues?
One issue. If you have multiple issues, please submit one proposal per issue. And you're going to see that it makes sense what I'm saying once Andy actually shows us an example of how to fill out the proposal.
Thanks.
Can you define members in an organization, voting members or non-voting members?
So as I said, one person, which will, officially, I'm going to use Sierra Club as the example again. Anjali, as director of the Sierra Club, will send a letter to the New Jersey Forest Task Force saying Taylor McFarland will represent the New Jersey Sierra Club in all voting matters of consensus. Taylor will then, do the voting for both climate and ecological health. Sierra Club has different staff members and we have volunteer leadership. None of these people will vote representing Sierra Club, and they don't have a vote as a private resident because they represent Sierra Club. So we don't want to double dip. We want to make this, fair for everybody.
Got it. Another question, what if you are a member of multiple organizations and choose to appear on this committee as a private individual to avoid conflicts with those organizations?
Yeah, so it depends, and Andy, please correct me if I'm wrong here. It depends the level of involvement you have with those organizations. If you're just a member, that's fine. That's perfectly fine. If you're leadership of an organization, then I would suggest for you not to identify yourself as a private resident.
Okay. Can you clarify the process in terms of how individuals who represent their organization show that they have approval of their organization to represent them?
Anjali, you just kind of hit that.
Yeah.
Okay.
See.
Right.
Clarify again. So Google form, letterhead, letter. That's it.
Yep.
Could you clarify the process by which proposals based on opinion are differentiated from peer-reviewed documents in the scientific literature?
Andy, you want me to take that?
Sure, go for it. You're on a roll, Anjali. Keep rolling.
I'm rolling. Okay, so peer review articles, scientific journals, that's obvious. We definitely, this report from New Jersey DEP, report from a federal agency that's obviously based on science and data. They obviously cite peer review science. So that's definitely very important to consider. What we don't want to see is, an article based on your opinion of an issue. Great, you have an opinion, but I'm sure your opinion is based on science and data.
Yeah.
So we want to see that science and data. Put your proposal, your statement in that submission, and it's basically your opinion, but it's supported by scientific data and information. I hope I've answered that question.
Anjali, could I add one thing there?
Go ahead, Tom.
So the proposal form will have one place where you can submit peer-reviewed studies related to your proposal, and another place where you can submit other sources related to your proposal. So that's one of the sort of simplest way where if we or anyone involved are reading a proposal, you're going to see whether that proposal has any peer-reviewed science attached to it or not. That's
Another question, how are the votes weighted? Are one private vote equal, one organizational vote?
We're still working on that.
Okay.
Like I said, we don't really want to get to that vote. We want to achieve consensus. We will absolutely report back as soon as we have that. So anticipate that for our next meeting, I suppose.
Let's see, as an individual resident, if I have one more issue on climate change, may I submit more than one proposal?
Yes.
Okay. John Thonnet, I may be a good example. I am here representing my 42-year-old environmental consulting practice, Thornett Associates. I am also a member of a municipal environmental commission. I am also a board member for the New Jersey Highlands Coalition, and I'm also a chair of the Natural Heritage Committee for that organization. But I want to represent my firm, Thornett Associates. What's the verdict?
I think you're a business. Eileen, what are your thoughts on this? I think
Yeah.
you're definitely a business.
We're going to have a couple of people who have this instance. So we're going to do that case by case because we want to know, we want you to be represented as well as possible. So
Exactly.
there are several of you who have this issue. So we will handle you case by case.
Yes.
Kimmy Way asks, which group is going to be looking at urban forestry and environmental justice?
That's a really good question.
I'd say both.
Right?
That issue.
Yeah.
It could come up on both. Yep.
Different lens, but yes. So please go ahead and
Submit the
submit
proposal. Yeah.
proposals to both work groups.
Yeah, I guess one thing I would add to that is just to remind people that the charge from Senator Smith in particular was to look at our public forest lands, not all forests, as much as there are many critical issues related to our forests throughout the state of New Jersey. In particular, we're focused on our public forest lands. That's not to say there are certainly, intersections between those issues and our public forest lands, but just to remind everyone about what the charge of the task force is and isn't.
Yep.
Thanks, Tom.
Yeah. Very good.
Okay, another question. So will DEP reports be weighted as peer-reviewed sources? They're important, but don't go through anonymous scientific review, so scientists don't consider them peer-reviewed.
Yeah, fair point. You can submit New Jersey DEP reports in the second section of the form, which is not peer review. It's an agency report, but we are absolutely considering that.
Another question, can organizations appoint an engaged backup who participates in all meetings in case, for example, the primary falls ill?
Wait, Andy, did you get that question?
Yeah. So an engaged backup if the primary falls ill. I mean, again, that's going to be, I guess, what do you guys think? Is it necessary on this initial round of Google form with their submission, with their letterhead to tell us
Yeah, I
their
think maybe,
primary and their secondary, or?
no, I think maybe first to clarify that you can have more than one person participate in discussions. But when we start to talk consensus and voting, it's just the designee. I think at this time, you don't need to have a second. But if the situation arises that your person is ill or cannot do it, at that time, you designate someone else, like a jury.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Eileen, for flagging that.
Yeah.
By all means, we are not, denying discussion. We want everybody to be part of the conversation and the discussion. It's just for voting matters. So thanks, Eileen.
Another question, what if the delegated voter has only signed up for one work group? Would they be allowed to join the other work group as well?
That's a tricky one. I think so. That's just me thinking. Tom?
I agree, but I think they should let us know right away, because the point is we don't want people coming in midstream that haven't been part of the conversations, right? It's if you got to be, if you're in, you got to be in sort of for the duration. So.
Yep.
Another question, is it one representative per organization per work group, or one rep per organization? Oh my gosh.
One
So is
rep
it one
per organization.
Okay.
One representative per organization. I'm gonna.
For voting purposes.
Yes, for voting.
But you could have
purposes.
other people participate from your organization, but you are going to have one designated voter for your group or for your organization.
I'm just wondering if there are any situations where there might be an organization that has different people participating in each of the work groups. I mean, I guess I'd be inclined to say we should allow for that. Maybe they've got someone who's got much more expertise in one area than the other, and they don't have, one person who can make a commitment to staff both work groups. So
I would totally agree. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So maybe we need to clarify on our form when we send it out. You need a designee for each work group. You need to tell us who that is. That makes sense?
Great. I see a lot of thumbs up, so that works for people.
I think we kind of were okay with that. We just didn't communicate it very well. Yeah, I think we were expecting that. We just didn't have it communicated. Yeah, it was not your fault. Yeah.
We're also trying to, we're dealing with so many people. There's 4 of us. We're trying to simplify the process for both our sake as well as yours, but this makes total sense.
Yep.
Okay, another question. Can we talk to others outside of the meetings? How do we do that? And how do we get their contact info? Yeah,
so that's something that I've been thinking about, that the 4 of us have to really hash out, as in how do people get their information? I'm sure not everybody knows each other here, but what do you think for co-chair?
I think where we landed last was that there would be a public list provided for who's in each work group, but we were going to refrain from publishing people's contact information just to protect people's privacy. We didn't want to get into that, into that situation. So would you guys agree that that's something we can do? And then they're kind of on their own to figure out how to contact those people.
Yeah, because it is a public process. So in the end, any report, your name and association will be included, not your email address, of course.
Right.
So we're comfortable with that. But we understand we didn't want to share email addresses. But if you're looking for experts, a lot of their information is readily available. If you're looking for folks who are at the universities or at DEP, Department of Agriculture, or elsewhere, those are generally readily available. But we can provide a list of names.
I wonder if we could provide an opportunity for people that are part of the either work group that want to share their information in some way. I don't know. I'm just off the top of my head here, that it's an option, right? If people want to share their info, they can. We find a place where we can put that's accessible to anybody that wants it.
Another question, will consideration be given to regional weighting for consensus and or voting to ensure all parts of the state, north and south, are fairly represented?
So based on the conversations that we have had so far, there's definitely a difference versus a regional or a state group or organization versus a very local small group. So we're considering that into the small versus large organization. But in terms of equal representation, north versus south, or like geographical representation, I mean, it depends on the participants, right?
Yep. But the proposals will take into consideration. I don't know if the question was getting at the Highlands region versus the Pinelands, and the recommendations related to the forest may be different. So in the proposal stage, that should kind of flesh itself out. A proposal may be specific to the Pinelands, or maybe specific to Northern Jersey or something like that. I don't know if that was part of the question too, but just a thought.
Let's see. Does the work group support media coverage of the deliberations?
We have not thought of that.
Do people want to see us really, or hear from us?
Eileen.
The press hasn't been invited to the work groups. We did invite the press to the kickoff meeting because that was more exploratory, explanatory, whereas the work groups are working groups, and generally speaking, the presence of the press dampers transparent discussion. So I think we talked about this a tiny little bit, but we should agree that in order to have unhampered, transparent conversations, that the press would not be invited to the work group level deliberations.
Another question, can organizations and individuals join during the process, or is the participant list locked?
So because this is an evolving conversation, this is a working group, we really would like to start with a solid group, and then work our way through all of the topics. If we have different people coming in and out, the conversations changes. We cannot keep track of different items of discussion. So we really just want to see this list. Co-chairs, if you want to add anything to that.
I would agree, and I think we did provide ample opportunity for folks to sign up, multiple opportunities. So we kind of, at some point, we just have to draw a line in the sand and say we're done inviting people. Now we're moving on to the work of getting things done. So that we've already gotten to that point. So we're not taking signups anymore.
Okay, and is there a public list of these rules and processes that can be sent to the members, just for everybody to have and to understand?
Rules as in rules of engagement?
Just the process, the voting, kind of questions that were asked and not really answered. Is there more information?
We can definitely. Oh, so I forgot to mention this, or maybe Andy, you mentioned this and I don't remember, but we're going to have a Google Drive where the original materials from the kickoff meeting, so the recording, the agenda, the questions, New Jersey DEP presentations are going to be present. And then inside this Google Drive, we're going to have 2 folders, one for climate, one for ecological health. Once all 4 co-chairs go through all proposals and the supporting information, we will make all of this accessible to all of you, because this is a work group. So we have scheduled meetings, and we expect all of you to join these meetings to work. So we ask everybody we're going to communicate, of course, assuming, let's just pick fire as the example. On next Tuesday, we don't have a meeting next Tuesday, but whenever. Our next meeting, we're going to be discussing fire with the lens of climate change. We're going to communicate, these are the proposals that we will be discussing. We expect all of you to read those proposals and to come ready to actually have a conversation about the details so that we actually reach consensus and we get the work done. Because imagine if we have 100 people show up to a meeting and 70% of people don't know what we're talking about. We're not going to get anywhere. This is a work group. So we are going to make this this Google Drive with both work group folders accessible to all of you. All of the information will be available to everybody. This is transparent. And answers to all questions will also be there.
Yep.
I did get one question directly, Taylor. I don't know if this came to you, but just to clarify my statement about the charge of the task force and where did that come from? So I'm happy to answer that. So the 4 co-chairs very early on met with Senator Smith, where he laid out, what he was asking us to do, and it was very clear that he was focused on issues related to our public forest lands. We even had some conversation about, well, what about private forest lands? And he said, well, I think you're going to have your hands more than full just dealing with the public forest land issues. If you can figure all of those out and you still have time left over and you want to tackle some private forest land issues, power to you. But so I think we all agreed that, it's a huge task that we have to wrestle with issues related to our public forest lands, and we need to stay focused.
Thanks, Tom. Taylor, do we have, Eileen?
There was another question that I thought would be good to raise. So some people have blogs, or they have mechanisms of communication that are more informal. They like to share their activities. And a question has come, can I share deliberations on my informal communications? And I would say, much like we don't want the press to hamper discourse, that will really hamper discourse. Imagine if you disagree with someone in a work group deliberation, and then that person highlights your disagreement on their informal communications. So I would ask to really keep our discussions closed, be respectful of each other. We are going to disagree, and we want you to feel comfortable presenting your position. And I don't think we can have that if people are writing about it externally.
Thanks, Eileen. We did get one question. So do we have members representing the tribes in the state and minority serving organizations? We actually reach out to tribe organizations, right, Eileen? And we didn't hear back. So that's the answer. Taylor, do we have more questions?
I think is our mission to make recommendations regarding managing New Jersey public forests, or is it New Jersey public and private forests?
I think Tom really hashed that out. So public lands.
Public, yeah.
Okay.
Ken, I see your hand raised. I don't know if you can put your question in the chat. Can you do that? No? Okay, so Taylor, if we don't have more questions, I'm gonna let Ken mute himself, if that's okay.
Sure.
Ken, I've asked you to mute. Yep.
Yeah, so well, actually, I did put it in the chat, but it never came up.
Okay.
There was a statement earlier in, I think, the last meeting that said something to the extent of organizations that do not carry their weight will not be able to vote. Is there a mechanism?
What carrying their weight, as in like participating in the meetings?
Yeah, well, yeah, people that are just there. I don't know.
Well, you have to show up. You have to be part of the conversation. That's what we are encouraging, especially that person that would be representing a specific organization. And I think it's to your best interest, right? If you're here, it's because you want to participate and you want to have your opinion be voiced in this report to the legislature. So That's really,
Yeah, I just wondered if there was any metric around that. And let me just also say that, and the reason I originally raised my hand was to again ask that you send everybody the list of everybody that's, that is signed up, because that will really maximize effective participation, so that all individuals will have an opportunity if they want to work with other groups, or not just be on their own, they'll be able to do so. And if there's a problem, I mean, you already sent out everybody's emails already, but if there's an issue with people not wanting their email, they can opt out, but 99% I'm sure are okay with their emails. They know this is a public process. So I'm just saying I would encourage you strongly to do that.
thank you for that, Ken. We will look into this because, definitely there's some people that don't want their information to be shared. So we will, yes, we understand. We will look into it. Thank you. Taylor,
Got
any more?
another, we got a raised hand there
Mhm.
from
Melissa.
Melissa. Do you have a question, or can you put it in the chat?
So I think her
Or is that
question
not
was, do we include in urban forests? Are we covering that?
Oh, okay.
Andy, go ahead.
Okay, I think when Tom kind of shared, like, our charge is public forest, there's obviously overlap with, urban forestry, things like that. So some of that stuff is going to come up. If you have again, this is where if you have a specific item that you have a concern with or for, that's where this proposal process works for you. So bring it to a proposal, collaborate with other members of the work group, make a submission, and then we'll take a look at it. So
I think we've answered many questions, and Andy, you have to give us your example on how to
yes.
submit the proposal. So why don't you go ahead?
Yep. Okay. So Taylor, can I share my screen? Is that possible?
Yeah, I think you can.
Okay. Multiple. Okay. At the moment, it's giving me 3 options. One participant can share at a time. Multiple participants. I'm not seeing the option. Wait a minute. Never mind. I got it. See, I knew it would happen eventually. Okay. Can you guys see this? All right. Okay. So I'm going to read through this. Kudos to Eileen. She did a lot of work on this, trying to make it kind of flow and make sense in as few words as possible, but it's very detailed. Okay. So here it is. This is what you'll have access to. This is where you will submit your proposals. Okay. So please use this form to submit your proposal for discussion and consideration by participants in your work group. Statements and data should be validated by cited literature. Please provide documents or links of material that support your ideas. You can upload up to 10 documents here. Please include links in your narrative section. If you have trouble, please contact your work group co-chair. In our case, I'm going to replace that with please contact Angelique. Do not contact me. I'm just joking. No. So contact your work group.
Andy.
So contact us if you have trouble. We're happy to help. Submit a proposal for one specific recommendation. So Angelique kind of covered this. That could be included in state legislation related to protection or management of our public forest lands. If you have multiple recommendations, please submit separate proposals for each one. So Angelique covered this. The first round, our due date is June 30th, 2022. So at the end of this month. If you're submitting a proposal on behalf of an organization, please ensure that your organization has reviewed and approved the submission. So that's pretty important that the organization that you are representing knows that you are submitting this proposal. Please indicate if more than one individual or more than one organization is submitting the proposal. Collaborative work is encouraged. So Angelique kind of hit on that too. So if it's multiple groups, make a list of multiple groups that are making the submission. Here's a key ingredient. So I'm not that tech savvy, but some of these other folks are. So this is, they decided this was important. So I'm going to tell you it's very, very important. Please label your uploads, your file uploads using this format. So again, you don't have to remember this, right? This is all on this form. When you open this form to make a submission, you're going to see these instructions, okay? But the example is use your first part of it is going to be your work group. So in our world of climate, you're going to type climate, and then you're going to have a period, and then you're going to have your last name, and then you're going to have the file name. So climate's easy to remember. Your last name's easy to remember. The file name is really just a keyword, 2 keywords, something that kind of keys us in on what your proposal is, okay? So if it's about fire, don't call it deer, call it fire, right? So that's hopefully makes sense. Okay, so here we go, okay? We're gonna just kind of go through this quickly. Hopefully it all comes together here. So I put my email in there first, okay? Now I'm gonna go down to the submitter. That would be me. Now I'm gonna go down to additional submitters. Let's say Angelie's with me on this one,
Yep.
and so is Tom, and so is Eileen. The organization, point of contact, we're gonna say my organization for the moment, Forestry Association. And wow, that's good spelling, association, there we go. And organization point of contact. So clarify here, Eileen, Tom, this should just be one, correct? Even though there's multiple submitters, should we pick a point person for that that proposal?
Yes, there's
Okay,
one
okay.
point person and 1 point organization.
Got it. Okay. So even if you're submitting a proposal alongside of, so if Angelie and I have a proposal together from Forestry Association and Sierra Club, we should pick kind of a point person, okay? So in this case, I'm going to leave it New Jersey Forestry Association. Additional, here it is. See that? It's very, what's that called? I don't know what that word is, where it kind of guides you through it. So additional organizations. So I'm going to put Sierra Club. This would be New Jersey Sierra Club, right? Okay. Now, has your organization signed off on this submission? If you click no, that's probably not helpful. So hopefully you're going to click yes every time. All right. Work group. We are working in the climate work group. Okay. General topic area. So I'm just going to use what our example was. So I'm just going to say deer management. Okay. My proposal title is there are a lot of deer.
In New Jersey.
In New Jersey, yeah, there we go. In New Jersey, too many cars have dents. Okay. So that's like my proposal title. Like I'm being silly. Okay. So in here, you would put together a proposal narrative. Okay. So I'm going to then explain, I'm going to flesh out there's too many deer. And I'm also going to cite some sources that talk about that support my assumption that there are too many deer. Maybe that's a recent, I think the Farm Bureau did some studies recently. Maybe there's a Farm Bureau study you can cite, et cetera, et cetera. So that's where you're gonna kind of flesh it out. That's the 2,500 characters, which we're thinking that's about a page. Is that what we were thinking? Okay, so it's about a page, okay? Quite a bit of room to kind of make your point, okay? References, we have divided these. Angelie hit on this. We have references that are peer reviewed, and then we have references that are kind of our other category, okay? So I'm just going to go on the other one real quick and make sure this thing works. So I'm going to click add file. This is a required question. Okay, see that? This thing is very intuitive. Is that the right word? Intuitive, yeah. Okay, so proposal narrative, deer are bad. Okay. References peer reviewed, other references. Okay, so I'm gonna click on other references, add file. It's gonna take me to, okay, so I need to go to my computer here. I'm gonna go to some articles on deer, and I've got this one here called Deer Dying All Over New Jersey, New Jersey 101.5. I have no idea what that is, but I found it. So here it is. This is just like a commentary from a newspaper article. Okay, so I've got that. I just clicked it. It's in there. Now I'm gonna hit upload. Okay. There it went. So now I see that this PDF has now been uploaded. I see it right here. Okay.
Andy, I just want to
Yes.
flag that. Great, but you need to follow the format of naming the documents.
I don't want to do that. What if I don't want to do that? I'm just kidding.
No, I'm.
So,
Just-
all right, good call. So
But
let's go back up the list here. Where does it say that? It says
you don't
please
have
label
to
your
do it,
file
but
uploads. Nope.
for everybody,
Okay.
it's
Should I try
okay.
that again, or should I just let it go?
No, let it go.
Think everybody's got that figured out? Okay.
Yeah.
So okay. So just to clarify, I feel like, see, I'm slow at this stuff. So yeah. So here's a thought. Just this maybe will make more sense. It's starting to make sense to me now. So I'm going to submit 5 articles, 5 PDFs related to this deer topic. I'm going to put climate, Bennett, deer management 1 for that document I just submitted. And then if I have additional documents, I'm then going to label them number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. Is that correct, Angelique?
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then we're good, right? We're going to hit submit and let's see what happens. I have no idea what happens at this point. Oh, wow. Okay. See all the images, mountains or hills?
Gotta
Can
make sure
everybody help me here? Holy smokes, this is crazy. Mountains or hills? Yes, that's not one. Okay, let's see. Verify. All right. A copy of your response will be emailed to the address you provided. Your response has been recorded. So it's in. If I went to my email inbox, I'm guessing I'd have something over here. Not yet. So we'll have to.
It'll take a couple of minutes.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, so that is the basics of how you submit it. So the questions were probably after, I guess, for Anjali and myself and Tom and Eileen are really kind of the mechanism of this proposal form. So when we say, like, if you need anything, you can ask us, we're not really here to help create proposals as much as we're here to help you submit the proposal. So if you're having trouble on the submission side, we absolutely would be more than happy to figure out how to help you with that. And if you're not super savvy with a computer, that's where you collaborate with somebody who is, and who can help you make a proposal. I guess, go ahead, Anjali.
No, I just want to add, Eileen just clarify that the next meeting is focused on helping people with proposals. So
Yeah.
I encourage everybody to sort of start, and then so that you have questions for the next meeting. Thank you, Eileen. Sorry, Andy, go ahead.
No, that's okay. So not to get ahead of ourselves, but as far as our schedule goes, we will have another meeting at this same time in 2 weeks exactly. Okay, so on Monday, June 20th will be that next meeting. We've penciled in 4 to 6. That will be the meeting for proposal help. So if there's anything you need relative to proposals, that's the meeting for you. So we will all make ourselves available to answer those questions.
So Andy, we have 8 minutes left.
Mhm.
We want to go over the meetings so far that we have scheduled. And then if we have any questions, I see Doris, you have a question. So I'm gonna ask to mute you. Go ahead, Doris.
Hi, I'm Doris Lynn with the League of Humane Voters of New Jersey. There was some discussion earlier about groups pulling their weight to be allowed to vote. I really don't like this idea of expecting groups to pull their weight and speak at every meeting. We have 90 people in this meeting. We can't expect everyone or every group to speak at every meeting. I think everyone who attends should be allowed to vote. I mean, the reason the chat is disabled because there are just too many people here for everyone to be speaking. The meetings will become unwieldy.
Mhm.
We hear you, Doris. I think
Yeah.
we definitely, we are aware that there's a lot of people, and we definitely do not expect everybody to be super active, especially when we're discussing specific proposals. And then we want to hear from those, you know, the writers of those proposals. What we need is participation. What we need is for groups and organizations and residents to be present, to be part of, to sort of listen, right? You're aware it's an ongoing conversation. And that's how I see it. Andy?
Yeah, I would agree. We don't have some, you know, Doris, to we don't have some kind of measuring stick like attendance sheet. I mean, this is really up to the participants to really jump in here. Now, if you've not been present on a Zoom call for the first 4 Zoom calls and all of a sudden you want to show up on one, I think that's indicative of someone who's not been engaged in the process. So talking in a meeting is not not what we're looking for. It's just being present, being part of the conversation. So I hope that's helpful. It's not perfect. Like I said, it's not perfect at all. So.
Thank you. We're going to take just one more question, just because we want to respect everyone's time, and we need to go over the meeting schedule. So Cynthia, I see, I'm gonna ask to unmute you, and or Taylor, do we have other questions also coming to you?
Yeah, I think Sarah Webb asked when submitting a proposal, is there like a list of topics or issues?
That's really up to the participants. Whatever is concerning to you, whatever it's important to you that the task force has a consensus recommendation to the legislature. It's really up to you.
Yeah, and that's where I would say too, like I'm reading the question, is there a list of topic issues? I have a list of 11. My guess is there are other people with very similar thoughts and ideas that could possibly collaborate to either minimize the other submissions we get from other people. Like what we're trying to avoid in some cases is getting 19 submissions that say the same exact thing from 19 different people. We'll have to kind of deal with them all at the same time in a meeting, but it'd be great if there was some collaboration and we kind of, instead of 19 on the same topic, maybe there was 5 or 6 and people had already started to collaborate a little bit. So, hey, there's one question that I see that I think might be helpful, Anjali, that before we get to Cynthia, it says, I'm concerned, I don't know the answer. I'm concerned that as a member of my environmental commission, I will need to get permission from my commission or municipality to make a proposal. I don't know how to answer that question.
I think it depends the level of work that you do with your commission. I like what Eileen said previously on a case-by-case basis. So we would look into that, but if you are not involved in policy decisions or setting policy for an organization or your environmental commission, and you're just a member, right? I think you can identify yourself as a resident, but on a case-by-case basis, we will help you out for sure.
Good.
There's another question. Is there a place or platform to find collaboration partners?
I think Ken kind of alluded to that. We're all recognizing the necessity to allow people to communicate and provide an opportunity for people to share information. Let us kind of work on that as co-chairs, if you will. Give us just a little bit of time to figure out how we can do that in a manner that we're comfortable with. So I know the email went out and most people's emails are already circulating, and I understand most people don't really worry about it, but we want to be as respectful as possible. So let us kind of think on that and how we'll allow you to communicate with each other or get in touch with each other. Because I know there's some of you know each other really well and you have each other's email addresses, but I'm sure there's a few of you who maybe aren't as well connected, and we want to make sure you're able to connect to people. So we'll work on that. Is that fair, Anjali?
Yep.
Okay.
There's one more question. What should we do if our organization can't meet prior to June 30th to approve a proposal?
I don't know.
June 30th, I'm going to say, I don't think we're going to be voting before June 30th. So I think you're going to be okay in that instance. Just participate, just, everyone participate. If we do find ourselves in a situation where we're actually going to vote before June 30th,
We won't be, yeah.
I don't think we will.
No. And I think,
we're going to be okay.
I think our question may have been more, Eileen, towards she's part of a group that doesn't meet that often. And before they can make a proposal as a group and sign off on it, what if they can't do that before June 30th? So one simple answer is we will have the August 31st deadline. So that would be the most logical answer, I guess. And guys, there's going to be plenty of things that run over from this first round to the second, no doubt about it. But also, perhaps you have an idea, a proposal that you're thinking of, or your organization is thinking of. Perhaps you can then team up with another group that could submit it on your behalf. I don't know the inner workings of your group, but hopefully that gives you a little bit of comfort that we will be taking proposals again up until August 31st. So. I guess I can do my stop screen share here. What do we want to take that one hand raise there, Angeli, Cynthia?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yep. Sorry, I interrupted.
No, thank you. I was reading something, Andy. Cynthia, go ahead.
Hi. My name is Cynthia, and I have two comments. Well, one is a question and one is a comment. One is, can you send us all this information so that we know what we're doing when we get onto this website? Because like some of us only heard the audio and didn't see a lot of this video going on, so that we know what we're putting in there. And the other comment I have is, I just, on a personal note, just feel like deer is not an issue, and I kind of feel like us people in the state and urban sprawl over places, that more of the issue that we have for any kind of wildlife. And that's it.
Thank you, Cynthia. So thank you so much for flagging the audio versus visuals. We will work on that so that everybody has materials and sort of like instructions on how to follow the process. And on your comment, this, that's your point of view and your opinion, and that will definitely be documented whenever we get to any deer management discussions. Mm-hmm. So definitely we will document everyone's opinions on all issues. So please know that, and thank you.
Thank you.
So we are over time. So
yeah.
Very quickly, we're going to go over the meetings that we've already scheduled, and we asked everybody to RSVP for these meetings, so we understand and have an idea of who's coming. So like Andy said, we have, we're going to have our climate work groups meetings on a bi-weekly basis on Mondays, 4 to 6 p.m. So please note that. Next one, June 20th, all for proposal questions, as Andy said. June 30th, not a meeting, but to highlight, that's the due date for the first round of proposals. This is all in your agenda, by the way. July 1, dissemination of proposals and materials to work group participants via Google Drive. Like I said, there's going to be folders accessible to you with all the information and proposals.
Hey, Angela,
yep.
Just to clarify, that's the day after June 30th. So I'm not sure we can honor that date as co-chairs to review the proposals and to begin to kind of segregate them into buckets. So I think that was been an idea we had earlier on, but I'm just backtracking. I'm not sure we can do that.
Yeah, no, fair.
And also, weren't we also thinking about disseminating materials in kind of chunks prior to meetings? Like, okay, July 11th, or maybe it's July 6th or 4th, like a week ahead of time, we're going to send a chunk of proposals that we're going to be considering at that first meeting. Is that fair? I'm just, yeah.
No, I agree. And I think it's really going to depend on how many proposals we get.
Yeah, good point. Yep.
We get total of 30 proposals. We're gonna make this, we can disseminate this quickly, probably not by the next
Yeah.
day. Thank you, Wendy. It's gonna take us a couple of days, but we can probably make all of that accessible at the same time. But if we get 200, 300 proposals, please bear with us. As expressed before, we're just 4 people with a little bit of help on the side. So we're gonna try to make all of the information accessible as fast as possible, but if there are many, then we might just go the route of like per issue, right? If the next meeting will be dedicated to deer management, we will focus on that, for example, and make that accessible. I think, right? I think that makes sense, Andy, right? And Eileen, yes, and Tom.
Yeah, I'm just gonna re-emphasize what you said. If we get 5 proposals, that's quite manageable. And I know there must be some frustration in the unknowability of some of these processes, but we don't know if we're going to get 5 or 500. And that is going to impact how we can react. Because as we mentioned earlier, we're volunteers and we have full-time jobs elsewhere. So do bear with us. We are in an ideal world, we will send you all the materials out in plenty of time before the meetings. And that is our intention.
Yep.
It depends. It all depends.
Thanks, Eileen. I think I was July 1st. Yeah, thank you, Andy, for the flag. July 11th, work group meets to discuss proposals. So July 11th would be the first date that we focus on proposals. Same for July 25th. And then August 15, work group. August 15, the same. August 29th, the same. And then August 31st would be the deadline for the second round of proposals. So of course, if you are all developing your proposals for the second round, please ask us questions to Andy and to me, Eileen or Tom, depending on the work group, and we will try to help as much as we can. And then September 1st, given that it's the next day.
The next round, yeah. But that's where we talked about towards the end of August, we're going to create another list of dates for our next round of discussion. So we're not going to wait until September 1st to let you guys know. Sometime in late August, we'll kind of have a co-chair meeting and we'll decide how we're gonna schedule things through the fall, trying to respect everybody's schedule. But at the same time, if you look at it, we have 4 meetings to discuss all the proposals that come in on June 30th. We don't really know how many of these proposals we can discuss in a meeting. Is it 5? Is it 10? Who knows? So it's a lot of this is just going to kind of happen. So if it were 5, that would mean we could only handle 20 in 4 meetings. If it were 10, we could handle 40 in 4 meetings. So to Anjali's point, it's kind of a moving target. So get your proposals in. Don't wait till August 31st, everybody. That would be bad. So we'll have nothing to do for 4 meetings. That'd be unbelievable. But we could go on vacation. That'd be fantastic. No, I'm just kidding. So anyway, okay. I think that's it, Anjali, right?
Yeah, I think that's it. So to all of the questions that we did not answer or we didn't have the chance to answer, we will get back to you, potentially put like a Q&A document in our Google Drive. Thank you so much, everybody, for being here and for asking questions and for caring.
Yep. Thank you all. Have a great day.